Know that a student is experiencing some form of academic distress, and we'll kind of get into some specific examples. Interpersonal problems, right? Always asking for help with personal problems. Withdrawing, so you might have a student that used to be social and then you find out that they become very isolated. They're not really socializing with their friends as they normally do. They're not sitting with their friends at the lunch table anymore, so on and so forth. So just focus on that, pay attention to that withdrawing that students do, and inability to get along with others. Easily irritable, and sometimes that's us too, but it's excessive to an extent where you're finding that there's always this bickering among students with this particular student. And sometimes we could call these students disruptive, or we could say that, you know, they're disrupting our classroom environment and so on, but it might just be that they're experiencing something that's impacting them intrapersonally, right? And it's showing up interpersonally. And then threatening behaviors. So especially with all the different school shootings and so on that's going on, it's really important that we're paying attention to these threatening behaviors. So they might imply or make direct threats of harm to others or themselves, and they might display a firearm or a weapon in the school. I know when I was a school-based therapist, I had a client that showed up to school with a gun, right? And that was a very scary, something that we had to report, get the school resource officer involved with, get him referred to some outside services so he could get further evaluation, so on and so forth. But it's really important that we're paying attention to that. And I know it's a topic that we don't really like talking about when it comes to homicidal or suicidal ideations, but it's important. Again, like, we really want to stress that as teachers, you all spend more time with the students than we do. A perfect example, again, going back to my internship class, I was telling Dr. Jenkins last week, 2 of my students shared that they had experiences where a student expressed something in class and the teacher was like, oh, I knew they were just playing, so they really didn't refer them to the school counselor or say anything to the school counselor. And one of the kids ended up attempting suicide, right? Because in the classroom, he said, the work is too hard, I'm just gonna go kill myself. And she was like, he's just talking about the work, he said it was too hard, and he said it another time, and then they're getting a report that there was a suicide attempt. But this was not reported because the teacher just brushed it off and said he was just talking about the work, saying that it was too hard. So it's really important that we are taken a collaborative relationship with our school counselors and referring them, and honestly even asking, like, so you are thinking about killing yourself? It's uncomfortable to say, and it took me a while to be able to ask client that, but that's the best way to ask people if they are thinking about suicide. Yes.
So how does it affect the teacher? Like, does it fall back on them? Are they held accountable for it?
Yes, so right now there's this investigation that was launched into what happened in that specific situation, but I know in some school districts, teachers are reprimanded if something like that happens and they don't report it. Because again, you all are mandated reporters, right? And that child was at risk of harming themselves, even though it might be a child that says it often. What I've learned as a counselor is no matter what you know about a child, if they say something about hurting themselves or others, I'm reporting it. Always. And I'm following up on it, because you just never know.
And I would add, so I'm a little bit older than Dr. Caulder. So I finished my master's in counselor education way back in 2008. And my professor said to me, she had been in school counseling for 20 years internationally and in the US. And she said at that time, she goes, you know, we talked about suicides, and she said, you know, I've never been in a school that had a suicide. Here I am, first year school counselor, my part of the alphabet. First year, we have a suicide. We have a suicide. So it's really, really important. And as you guys know, if you do look on the news, if you look on social media right now, just the state of the United States, it's a little scarier. And so we need you more than ever. And as Dr. Caulder said earlier, it's not fair for us as counselor educators to ask you to do one more thing. But we're going to, because one of the things we wanted to talk about was, in case you don't know, The ratio for school counselors in the state of Georgia is 1 school counselor for 450 students. 1 school counselor for 450 students. So, when we're talking about referrals and talking about the importance of them, we need you. We need your eyes. We need your ears. We need your sympathy, your empathy. The example that was given earlier about the student that wasn't sleeping, was falling asleep in class. I know he wasn't doing the work. That's irritating as a teacher. I can't even imagine. But by that teacher letting the student come outside and express what was going on, she may have saved him from taking some other step. Because that's a lot for a 16-year-old to take on taking care of siblings and not really worrying about what grade they have. So again, we know we're asking a lot from you guys, but it's so important because you are going to see it. To give you just another example, I know you guys are very well aware of the teacher in Newport News that was shot. So Dr. Caulder and I are actually from Virginia. So my kids did not go to Newport News schools, but we almost did. They went to Williamsburg, James City County Schools, which is just the next county over. Don't think as teachers, and again, this is not to scare you, this is to tell you how much more important you are than ever. But don't think it can't happen here. Don't think it can't happen in your school system. So it's so important. But it's also important for you guys, I was thinking about when we were talking about academic distress and disruptive classroom behavior and simple things that you guys can do that may not seem like a mental health thing, but one of the things I suggest to all my teachers, to all my school counselors when we're in class, is one of the best interventions you can do if you have a disruptive kid. High school, middle school, elementary, works every time. If it's an especially disruptive kid, that happens a lot, and you need to reset them, if you will, let them take a note to the front office. Do you know how impactful that is? And the note doesn't have to say anything. The note can be dropping off a note from Mrs. So-and-so. And the front office knows, they know, so they're like, oh yeah, that walk to the front of this, because it's usually in the front of the school, right? Front office, usually in the front of the school. That walk to the front of the school gives some of those students that are having a bad day, for whatever reason, something's going on at home, their boyfriend broke up, their girlfriend broke up, whatever reason they have, they just need a minute. And that costs you guys nothing but a little slip of paper. Go take this to the front office and give them the grace of, if they, if they're gone for half an hour, okay, yeah, that's totally different. But give your student the grace of a reset. Didn't you guys need a reset occasionally? Right? That's when you give them individual work, right? You go work on that. Leave me alone. So, again, I'm not in the classroom, but I know it happens. Something that simple can change a student's life. It can help them reset so they can come back to your class and refocus. Does that make sense? Easy intervention, right? We talk about interventions in our world, sorry. Yeah. So, easy intervention though. Y'all can take that one and claim it as yours. Introduce it to your school and be like, yeah, I came up with this. Absolutely you did.
So we're going to really quickly go through these because we really want to get more to things that you can do, right? Give some different suggestions, go through a couple of case studies. So when you think about mild distress, students in mild distress may exhibit behaviors that don't disrupt others, but may indicate that something is wrong with them and they need assistance, right? So serious grade problems or change from consistently passing to unaccountable performance, excessive absences, usually are markedly changing patterns of interaction avoidance. So going back to that withdrawal piece. So a lot of times when we look for changes in students, we're looking for changes in those outward changes where they're disrupting the class, or they're loud, or they're irritable, or getting angry. But sometimes it just means that a student that's normally engaged is now withdrawn and is really not paying attention. You're seeing that, you know, it's just different. And I know a lot of times when I talk to teachers, they're like, yeah, I could just tell that something was different with this child. Like, pay attention to that instinct, right? Because these things aren't really affecting anyone else, but it's giving you an indication as the teacher that something's going on with this child, right? Let me kind of check in with them and see what it is. So moderate distress now, that's more so exhibiting behaviors that indicate significant emotional distress. So keep in mind, students may be reluctant to, emotionally unavailable, or uncertain to ask for help. They have a lot of emotions. It's hard for us to ask for help as adults sometimes, so we can't really expect kids to just come to us and say, well, I'm going through this right now. Can you help me? It's not going to happen most of the times, right? So new or repeated behaviors would interfere with effective management or their immediate environment. So going back to those disruptive behaviors, begin to display aggressive or abusive behaviors towards others. Talk about unusual patterns of eating, sleeping. So if a child that's normally up in your class, you're noticing that they're sleeping more in class, or if it's a child that's normally you notice a decrease in appetite or an increase in appetite if you're in the cafeteria and you're interacting with them, just pay attention to those changes to see what's going on with those students. And then severe distress is when a student exhibit behaviors that's obviously a crisis, right? Or they're in need of some emergency care. So these would be more obvious. If a child is erratic, or if a child is just explosive when it comes to dealing with or speaking to other students, they're exhibiting signs of depression. You probably don't even know what that means, but again, you're seeing a change in their emotions, kind of paying attention to that. If they're telling you or expressing, or you see that they're engaging in some type of self-harming behavior. So this is when you know a child needs some type of immediate intervention or help. So going back to that word again. So just some quick guidelines of how to talk with a student at any level of distress. It comes back to what we were talking about earlier, is respect, right? Respect goes both ways. So just ensure that you're validating and respecting what the student is coming to you and sharing. It's really hard, kind of going back to what I said earlier, it's hard for us to ask for help. It's hard for us to express what's going on with us. So just imagine for the kiddos, right? And just think about yourself. Okay, thank you. Just think about yourself if you go and talk to a friend and they're coming back to you and they're saying, oh, you'll be all right. Is it really that serious? Just brush it off. Just think about how you would feel in those moments, right? So just be sure that you're valuing what's going on with that student. So allow them to talk freely. So an example, I noticed you seem upset today and wanted to check on you. You mentioned you were having a hard time. How are you doing? Just showing them that you care. That opens that space for them to really share what's going on with them. Try to be non-judgmental and use terms that don't dismiss what the student is experiencing. So I'm sorry to hear that. I want you to know that I'm here for you, and I want you to get the help and support that you need, right?
And we have resources.
Yes.
Again, we're not asking you to take our job on. We're asking you to identify. And even for those of us that are in the school system as school counselors, again, 1 to 450, we don't see them on a regular basis for therapy. Mm-hmm. We actually have resources outside of the school that we can refer students to, yes, where they can get big help. So, but if we don't identify them, if we don't have anybody to help identify them, we don't get them to the school counselor. The school counselor can't refer them to all these resources. Yes. There are resources in every county. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to make sure we mentioned that.
And I'm just going to touch on 2 more, and then we're going to get to the referral because we only have 5 minutes. But I really want to touch on avoid using over-promises or general answers such as, everything will be all right. Mm-hmm. I totally understand. Try not to worry too much. It's not that big of a deal. Because these sound like great things to say, right, in certain situations. But if you think about it, they're really dismissive. They don't really honor what you're going through. They don't really say that you see me and you care about me. This is telling me that I shouldn't feel how I feel, and that kind of perpetuates the shame and guilt that comes with experiencing some difficult experiences, right? And then also encourage the student to consider utilizing further sources of support in their lives, so friends, family members, so on. So you might say something like, thank you for sharing this with me. There are many resources available in the school, including the school counselor. Is it okay if I walk with you to our office? Walk with you to his office, right? So just sharing that information with the students. And then I'm going to let Dr. Jenkins wrap it up with how to go about referring students, because that's the meat of it.
Yeah. So the other statement I would say, if you can't remember anything else to say to the student and they're sharing whatever their woe is or whatever their worry is, one of the best ways that I try to remember to validate them is go, wow, that sounds really hard. Not that I know, not that I walk in their shoes, not any of those things. Wow, that's really hard. That simple sentence, you're validating what they're going through. And that is huge because everybody else has dismissed it. Everybody else has said everybody has stress. Everybody does that. All that happens to everybody. So you guys validating, again, you're our first responders in the school. So how do we refer? This right here. And are they getting a copy of the PowerPoint?
I can provide it.
I think we can. So this is just a simple form, simple checklist. It could be a half sheet of paper. How to refer students. We need to have their name. We need to have your name in case we need to follow up. The date, that's really important. Again, this is going back to those 3 areas. Academic, sudden change in grades, organizational skills, but you can literally just check whatever you're seeing off. Social emotional. Maybe it's, I think one of our, my students in internship, they've had students going through grief left and right. And so maybe that's what it is. Maybe they're withdrawn. Maybe they're just sad. Because, again, we could have lots of sessions with y'all, but we'll spare you. Grief looks different in children and adolescents than it does in adults. It does not hit the same way. It does not follow the same pattern. So a student might be fine one day, and the next day they're a hot, hot mess. And it's still all related to grief from a month ago. So that's one of those areas that we have to watch out for. Behavioral. Personal hygiene. Has that changed? Yes. Who's in middle school? Personal hygiene can change. They can stop caring about themselves. Maybe their self-esteem, they don't like something about themselves, so they give up completely. So again, this is a quick, all we're asking you to do is check. Emergencies, 100%, call your counselor immediately. If the counselor doesn't respond, contact admin, because we do work as a team, because it needs to be addressed immediately. If there's self-injury, remember that's one of those things we don't have a choice. We have to report, we have to address it. Doesn't matter, I'll put this out there, if they are cutting is a big thing. Hopefully y'all aren't seeing it in elementary, but I know middle school it's rampant. Lots of people have the understanding that cutting's different from suicide. It is. Cutting can be for attention, 100%, but we never want to assume that that's what it's about because we just cannot assume. So if you can go back one. So here, after their referral, don't be afraid to check in with the school counselor. But see that next statement? Don't get upset if they can't tell you what's going on.
Yes.
Please don't get upset with them. They are trying to keep confidence and trying to keep it within, that therapeutic relationship with the student. And it's not because we don't care that you brought it to us. We do, more than you know. But we've now kind of taken over. And if the student very well may come to you on their own, hopefully they're going to come to you and thank you. So that's really important. Things that that you can look for after the referral. Do you see a positive change in the student? Do you see no change? Do Do you see a negative change or just not enough information? Can you hold on 1 second? Okay, one quick case. You can go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm just going to go to the end because we are out of time.
We're out of time. Well, we're going to keep talking real quick. One quick case. Don't forget about your high achievers. So I want to mention that really quickly. We think high achievers, there's students that have straight A's, no problems. They're high achievers. Guess what? With whatever I can't think of, because I don't look at my kids' app, that puts the grades on there. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Infinite Campus.
Yes, Infinite Campus. Infinite Campus is awful. I know y'all love it. I know y'all love it. But here's just a really quick example. I had a student as a school counselor that came to my office, referred to me. I'm like, John, why are you here? He's like, Miss Jenkins, you know why I'm here. I'm like, yeah, grades. Do you want to talk about grades? No, Miss Jenkins, I don't. And he said to me one of the most critical things. He said, I'm going to be grounded by Friday. I said, it's Monday. How do you know that? He said, well, Miss Jenkins, my teachers aren't going to put in any more grades, and my parents look at Infinite Campus every Friday. And they base their decision on whether or not I'm grounded on Infinite Campus. They base my decision on whether I'm going to be grounded or not. So why does it matter? Why should I try? So your high achievers, your straight A students, maybe if their A's aren't high enough, then no, I know that's crazy, but they're there. We see it. So, and I know we're out of time, so I'm going to let Dr. Caulder.
So just real quick, we just want to remind you all that you play a critical role in, one, reducing the stigma. We know the stigma around help seeking and the stigma around mental health is there. We have it among ourselves in college as well. Going back to what I keep reiterating, it's hard for us to ask for help sometimes. So you play a critical role in reducing the stigma by just talking to students openly about what's going on with them, helping students to understand referral is not about severity. You don't have to be in a crisis to be referred to the school counselor. You could just be going through some type of interpersonal relationship issues with your peer or your boyfriend or so on and so forth. If you need to talk to the school counselor, they're there. It doesn't have to be severe for you to refer them. And reassuring that school counselors serve students for a range of concerns. So kind of related to that one. And then reminding students that seeking professional help is a sign of strength, because a lot of times, even among college students, we know that that's seen as a sign of weakness, right? Helping, when you think about just utilizing counseling services here on campus, we don't have a huge population of students utilizing those services, right? Because there's a lot of shame and guilt and stigma that comes with that. So just understanding that you're helping to break that cycle when you refer students. And thank you all for bearing with us as we went over. This is our information, and you can just come up front and we'll go ahead and sign off. So thank you again.
And don't forget, if you need a school counselor, you can go to them too, you guys.